Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to our explainer on the ancient world's absolute most famous conflict. Today, we're breaking down an epic story of gods, heroes, and a legendary architectural trick that has literally echoed through 3 millennia of human history.
Right off the bat, we have to look at this iconic ending. It's the ultimate climax to the ultimate war, right? A group of elite soldiers, huddled completely silently inside the belly of a massive wooden beast, just waiting for the dead of night to unlock the gates of an impenetrable city. But we really have to ask ourselves, is this climax actual historical fact, or is it basically just an ancient blockbuster movie?
Section 1. The Epic Myth of Troy.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because this entire 10-year war actually started with a rigged beauty contest. You see, Eris, the goddess of discord, was turned away from a divine wedding. And well, she was pretty irritated, so she tossed a golden apple into the crowd, inscribed simply, "To the fairest." Naturally, 3 goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, started bickering over it. The god Zeus didn't want any part of this, so he delegated the judging to a Trojan prince named Paris. Aphrodite ended up bribing Paris with the love of Helen of Sparta, who happened to be the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris accepted, abducted Helen, and inadvertently triggered a massive web of Greek alliances. It was basically an ancient World War I, as the Greeks banded together to get her back. What followed was a brutal, decade-long siege. The Greeks sailed this massive fleet across the Aegean Sea, but for 9 solid years, the impenetrable walls of Troy kept them completely at bay. The whole conflict was really defined by the legendary warriors on both sides. I mean, things looked incredibly grim for the Greeks when their absolute greatest fighter, the nearly immortal Achilles, just up and quit over a bitter dispute with the Greek leader Agamemnon. But after his close friend was killed in battle, Achilles returned in an absolute blind fury. He ultimately slays Troy's greatest champion, Hector, in a highly tragic clash right outside the city gates. But even the mighty Achilles wasn't totally invincible. When he was just an infant, his mother dipped him into the river Styx to make him immortal, but she held him by his heel, leaving it as his one single vulnerability. And in the chaos of battle, Prince Paris, guided by the god Apollo, shot a poisoned arrow that sliced right through that exact heel. Just like that, the epic life of Greece's greatest warrior was brought to a sudden, absolute end.
Section 2. The Giant Wooden Trick.
So the cunning Greek king Odysseus realized that if they couldn't force their way in, they were going to have to trick the Trojans into letting them in. The Greeks pretend to just give up. They dismantle some of their ships, build a massive hollow wooden horse, and pack their absolute best warriors inside the belly. The rest of the Greek fleet then sails away, but they just hide slightly out of sight. They left behind a single soldier, Sinon, who spins this elaborate lie to the Trojans, claiming the horse was a peace offering and a sacred gift to the goddess Athena.
Now you might be thinking, did they actually buy this? Well, not everyone fell for it. A Trojan priest named Laocoon was deeply, deeply suspicious. He furiously warned his people not to bring the strange offering inside. He even thrust his sword right into the wooden belly. But the gods had already decided Troy must fall. Poseidon sent 2 terrifying sea serpents out of the waves to completely devour Laocoon and his sons. To the terrified Trojans, this violent silencing was a crystal-clear sign from the heavens. The horse was holy, and Laocoon was being punished for doubting it. Believing the war was finally over, the joyful Trojans tied ropes to the beast and wheeled it right through their gates. They celebrated late into the night with heavy drinking and feasts. But once the city fell into a deep, drunken slumber, the trap was sprung. The Greek soldiers burst out of a hidden trapdoor in the horse, slaughtered the guards, and threw open the main gates of the city to their returning army. Troy was completely consumed by fire and bloodshed.
Section 3. Searching for real Troy.
Okay, so for centuries, people believed Homer's Iliad was just an entertaining fiction. A magical city of gods and demigods. But then, in 1870, a Prussian businessman and treasure hunter named Heinrich Schliemann traveled to Hizarlak, Turkey, and incredibly, he actually found ruins that perfectly matched the ancient Greek descriptions.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the number 9. Real archaeologists who followed Schliemann discovered that there wasn't just one city of Troy at this site. There were 9 distinct cities, literally built right on top of each other over thousands of years. It's like a giant puzzle.
Unfortunately, Schliemann was, well, he was much more of a treasure hunter than a careful scientist. He actually used dynamite to blast huge holes into the site, completely ruining massive portions of the archaeological record. He dug all the way down to the second layer, found a cache of ancient treasure, and proudly proclaimed to the world he had found the jewels of Helen. But modern dating proved he was off by an astounding 1,000 years. Those jewels were a full millennium older than the purported time of the Trojan War. So you're probably wondering which layer is the real Troy. Experts today point to layers 6 and 7. Layer 6 features massive, grand walls that fit Homer's epic descriptions perfectly, but the evidence shows it was destroyed by an earthquake, not an army. Layer 7, which was built right on top of those ruins, shows definitive proof of a brutal war, complete with weapons and arrowheads scattered in the streets, but the city itself was smaller and way less grand. Historians believe Homer likely combined the epic, indestructible grandeur of the 6th layer with the brutal wartime destruction seen in the 7th layer to create his ultimate dramatic setting.
Section 4. Truth behind the horse. If Troy was real, what was the horse? The 2nd century Greek writer Pausanias basically points out that the Trojans weren't gullible morons. To believe they would blindly wheel a giant enemy statue inside their own fortress attributes utter silliness to them. He argued that the horse had to be something practical, like a military contrivance. And this brilliantly illustrates why historians today focus on 3 highly plausible, completely non-magical explanations for what the Trojan horse actually was. Let's break them down. The first theory is that the horse was simply a battering ram or a siege tower. Ancient siege engines were routinely draped in wet, damp horse skins to prevent defenders from setting them on fire with flaming arrows. It's actually very easy to see how a battering ram covered in horse hides could later be poetically described as a wooden horse. The second theory looks to the sea. The ancient Greeks frequently referred to their ships as seahorses in their poetry. Furthermore, naval archaeologists have found that many Phoenician merchant ships of the era actually had the head of a horse carved right into their wooden bows. When Homer says soldiers loaded into the wooden horse, he might literally have just meant they were boarding their ships. But the third theory ties the archaeology together perfectly. Remember how Layer 6 of Troy was destroyed by an earthquake? Well, in Greek mythology, Poseidon is famously the god of the sea. But he is also the god of earthquakes and horses. So the crucial point is, it is incredibly likely that Homer used the Trojan horse as a brilliant poetic metaphor to explain how Poseidon sent an earthquake that breached the impenetrable walls of Troy, allowing the Greeks to flood in and slaughter everyone.
Section 5. A warning through the ages.
This chilling, immortal quote comes from the Roman poet Virgil in his epic, The Aeneid. Over thousands of years, the Trojan horse has evolved from a specific military tactic into our universal cultural shorthand for trickery, hidden threats, and fatal vulnerability. It is the ultimate reminder that non-threatening exteriors can harbor deep, destructive intentions, and that sometimes our greatest threats are the ones we invite right through our own front doors. It really forces us to look past the surface. We might laugh at the idea of the Trojans being foolish enough to wheel an enemy statue into their city, but it leaves us with this final thought. Even if the wooden beast never truly existed in history, what beautiful, seemingly harmless Trojan horses are we blindly wheeling into our own lives today? Take a moment to reflect on that. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and keep questioning the history handed down to you.